Well, hey, all right. Thanks for tuning back in. Again, this is Anthony, and we're talking about classroom management. We're really at the meat and potatoes section. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video. I'm going to get into the keys to building classroom norms, rules, expectations, and culture. Remember, guys, this stuff doesn't happen by accident. And I'm going to focus on Starbucks only because I go there often. I started writing this presentation while I was sitting in a Starbucks, and I'm actually drinking a Starbucks coffee right now. I want you to think about your experience being there, and I'll talk to you about mine. So, as I was writing this, I'm sitting there in the Starbucks, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, well, there aren't any guests that are walking behind the counter. Not one. I was in there for a while, maybe 2 hours. Not a child, not an adult, no one in between, not a senior, nobody. No one was barking orders at the barista. So everyone's in line. It was a busy time. Not one single order was being, told in an aggressive way, a loud way. The people in line were standing in a relatively orderly fashion. Not really too much slouching. People were generally typically in a single file. There were children next to senior citizens, and again, all in between. All right. There is an interesting way that the Starbucks folks design the seating arrangements. If you think about the seating arrangements in your classroom, pay attention to this piece. There's enough space between the patrons so as to really ensure comfortability by placing just the right distance between the guests. There's multiple options for seating. So different preferences people have, different opportunities they have to exercise their choice. Some chairs have soft, plushy cushions. There's tables that are set up for two. There's traditional hardwood chairs. There's larger working stations or tables that are available. There was outside seating, window seating, a whole array of options. Music, soft, jazzy music. It was exciting. It's playing it right at just the right volume. The lighting, there was just the right amount of natural sunlight coming into the windows. And there was a variety of ceiling lighting, ranging from spotlights, track lighting, and floods, all to create a very, very comfortable arrangement and atmosphere and culture. Again, it's interesting to note that there aren't rules posted. There's no one from Starbucks directing people with their fingers out, waving their fingers, or looking at folks with scowl, tough brows and tight jaws. None of that. And yet there's generally a upbeat, positive kind of vibe going on, which I think is fascinating. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide. Keys to building again. Some other observations. I didn't see any gum on the ground. I didn't see any gum on the chairs. Not that I'm looking at every chair, but certainly I was looking around. And I didn't see any signs that said, don't do it. I saw that the patrons were cleaning up after themselves. They finish, they get up, they take their garbage, they throw it out. I didn't see any signs directing that to be done. I didn't see any of the employees telling anyone to do it. The patrons' voices are generally quiet. And again, there weren't any signs to direct this or any verbal instructions about it. Some of the patrons were wearing headphones, but not at a level in which other people would be able to hear the music. So I thought that was very interesting. The lines, well, yeah, they can get long, and certainly you can see that people are in a rush, but I didn't notice anyone pushing, shoving, leaning in, elbowing, staring, smirking, or any of that. In fact, not a single complaint. I did notice that when patrons became visibly antsy or anxious, they kind of took it upon themselves to take out, maybe it was their personal handheld device. They began to interact with it. Some, Well, some actually ventured to engage in a discussion with whoever was in front of them or behind them, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. All right, so we're going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so again, what you have, patrons are rewarded for being there. All right, there's incentive there. First of all, they can enjoy the pleasant environment that was created for them. First and foremost, it feels good to be there. The ambiance is hip and current. It's not too trendy, but it's definitely not dated. Secondly, they get to enjoy excellent coffee. And although it certainly isn't the best, it is willingly made to the patron's exact requirements or specifications, right? So Starbucks figured a way to play into the specific wants, needs, desires, choices, and I mean exact, of their patrons. Thirdly, it seems that the people behind the counters, the baristas, it seems like they actually care. Well, if they do or do not, I guess that kind of remains to be seen, but it seems that they did. And I think they did because they were engaging in conversation with guests. They were initiating the conversations. They seemed to be interested in your preferences. Even though they were busy, they would be sure to ask again and clarify. Some of them were smiling, even though they were under stress. And it seemed for me, as an outside observer, to kind of pick up on, even if they were stressed or not, considering that the line was long. And it was long for quite a while. I didn't see any fatigue kind of setting in on these folks. It was common for me to hear the workers talk to guests that they knew by name. So, and even in some cases, the barista was able to remember how some of the regular guests really wanted their coffee, even in the midst of all the chaos. I thought that was really interesting to note and useful for us as teachers. So another couple of interesting points as we move on to the next slide. Not only were, quote unquote, those kinds of people at the Starbucks, no, or only those raised from good parents with real discipline in the home, or with two traditional parents, or people from my generation when people really cared. No. All types of people were found in the Starbucks. I personally picked up on musicians. How do I know? They were hanging on to their instruments, right? Poets. I was able to look over the person next to me and it looked like they were actually writing a poem. Saw a minister, saw a plumber, certainly saw other teachers. I just get a sense for that. I think I picked up on a few. I saw people that just based on my own assessment seemed to be very wealthy, but by the labels on their clothing and the haircuts and different things. And then people who seemingly were a little bit on the less advantaged side, but they were all there. And they were there while I was writing this. So here's the point. For the most part, all people were able to adapt to a culture that was carefully crafted. It was crafted a long time ago, too, by a successful person who just began to kick around ideas way back in the 70s, sharing those ideas with other people, writing them down, and they became ingrained in the expectations or the culture of that environment. So I'm convinced that you can do the same. Thanks for hanging in there for this long slide, and we're going to take a break for now, and we will continue with defining individual goals that are tied to social and emotional learning and executive functioning. Thanks.